Hello, and welcome back to the Punt Intended podcast, a Dynasty fantasy basketball podcast and a sports ethos production presented by FanDuel. As always, I'm your host, Mark C., the Dynasty leader over at Sports Ethos. On today's episode, we're going to tackle how managers should approach trade deadline news and rumors. Of course, relevant this past week was the Giannis Antetokounmpo bombshell, we'll call it. I don't know if it's much of a bombshell, but how should we react to it? Should it spur us to any action? Then we look at why Deni Avdija has taken such a massive leap this season, and can we project this going forward? Then we'll look at why Jaren Jackson Jr. is faltering, and maybe against some signs that, this might be something we should expect from him. Lastly, we'll dive into the Detroit Pistons. Yes, the current Eastern Conference leader, Detroit Pistons, and look at the makeup of their team and why even though they're doing really good, there's still a lot to look for on this team in terms of dynasty. We'll get into all that here on the pod. But a little bit of housekeeping up top. You can find me over at Blue Sky at Mark C Sports Ethos and on Twitter at MacAttack145. My Dynasty writings and rankings can be found at Sports Ethos with an NBA Fantasy Pass subscription. This past week, rather last Wednesday, I dropped my latest Dynasty check-in article, Rookie Stock Watch. And, it's a month and a half into the season. Hard to analyze any stats seriously in that time frame. So what I did is I basically wrote some quick hitters on every relevant rookie. And I mean pretty much every relevant rookie who has seen some NBA playtime to date. And just wrote my notes on them, what I'm seeing from film and eye test, and things I'm looking for the rest of the season from them. So you'll definitely want to check that out. And that way you can maybe find some sleepers or maybe see what rookies aren't exactly playing up to snuff so far. Again, you can get access to that with an NBA Fantasy Pass subscription over at sportsethos.com. But let's get into today's topic here, and that's going to be trade season. It's always exciting, I think, in Dynasty when you see trades going back and forth in your league. And of course, as Dynasty managers who love trading, of course we're enamored with NBA trade season. And things really, I don't want to say heated up, I guess. Things maybe got started with just trade deadline season, with the Giannis Antetokounmpo rumors, murmurings, talks. Giannis, looks like Giannis and his agent are going to speak to the Bucks about his future and see what that entails. I'm not here to speak on how truthful if Giannis is going to get traded or not here. Honestly, I don't think anything happens this trade deadline because it's just so hard with aprons and such to make it happen. But we'll see. Really, the larger ramifications that this has spurred is I've seen so much talk in the Dynasty community about already talking about who gains and who loses and what all these potential trades could mean. Managers are even trying to pre-buy players, pre-sell players in anticipation of this trade and these rumors. And make no doubt of it, any Giannis trade is going to be massive and is seemingly going to have plenty of implications for Dynasty. Or does it? That's the question I'm actually going to pose here in this segment. Do any of these, not even the trade rumors, do any of these trades that materialize actually matter a lot for Dynasty? Or do we overrate trade rumors and deadlines? And then what can we do as Dynasty managers about that? Because I like all Dynasty managers, I love, maybe not all Dynasty managers, but I love actually selling the hype or buying players who are underhyped. Because I think that's where there's a lot of value to be found. When managers are already assuming that a player X is going to explode or player Y's value is going to crater because of some trade that may or may not even happen. I'm already kind of putting the cart before the horse here. That's basically going to be the lesson here, is that don't go crazy with these trade rumors and assume things are going to happen that's then going to maybe affect the player's value. So in the Bucks case here, if Giannis is traded, there's going to be some young core asset that's going to be at the crux of that. Could be Dylan Harper, could be Stephon Castle, could be Almond Thompson, Alperen Sengun. something along those lines, right? There's going to be a key player, a key young prospect involved, and then plenty of picks, assets, maybe some win now players. Maybe if he goes to the Hawks, is it Trae Young or Jalen Johnson that gets moved? You're talking something like that, right? The Bucks are going to bring in some new players. So managers are already seemingly to fear, oh no, my Ryan Rollins breakout, is that going to crash? Kevin Porter Jr., is he not going to have as much value? What does this mean for Kyle Kuzma and Bobby Portis? Is Bobby Portis just going to have to do more and maybe get the season back on track if Giannis Antetokounmpo is traded? I'd argue that in the long term, honestly, a lot of these players' values don't actually change that much. And we're going to look at the last two trade deadlines and see why I'm saying that's the case and why really it's not the trades themselves that should spur our action. It's just our basic evaluation of the players that we make anyways. So let's look at last year's trade deadline and look at the moves that actually happened here. First, Jimmy Butler was moved from the Heat to the Warriors. Oh, and so of course, with Jimmy Butler off the Heat, yeah, all these Heat players are going to gain. Andrew Wiggins is going to have some solidified value, obviously take some of those shots, but Nikola Jovic going to have room to explode. Jaime Jaquez Jr. is finally going to get his season back on track. Tyler Herro is going to explode. Bam Adebayo is going to see more usage. Did any of those things happen? Wiggins basically did pretty similar. Tyler Herro, if anything, actually struggled a little bit as all the pressure was on him. Bam Adebayo was Bam Adebayo. Nikola Jovic was still kind of a little in and out of the rotation, didn't see any sizable jump. Jaime Jaquez was still struggling over that season, still, frankly, on the fringes of the rotation, and is only now this season seeing some improvement. Where was all this supposed jump from these players coming from? It wasn't from the trade deadline. It was just, frankly, the natural course of the players involved in that Jimmy Butler trade. And then Jimmy Butler on the Warriors, oh, Jonathan Kuminga's stock's going to drop. I mean, frankly, Jonathan Kuminga's stock dropped because he frankly didn't play that well, and he hasn't played that well this season. It's not because Jimmy Butler's there that Jonathan Kuminga hasn't been able to show that much. It's because Jonathan Kuminga is not really doing much to show anyways, right? The Jimmy Butler trade wasn't the reason that any of those associated players saw any of their dynasty stock change. Luka Doncic to the Lakers. I myself said, oh, Reeves is going to be hurt a little bit, less usage, not going to be able to grow or develop as much, less on ball reps, and it's going to be the Luka Doncic and LeBron James show. No, that was wrong. That was wrong. Austin Reeves is thriving this season. Yeah, partially because LeBron James is injured. But even in the second half, or rather post-trade deadline last season, Austin Reeves was actually doing better because his opportunities were just that much easier with Luka Doncic in town. So that was just, I think, different than many dynasty managers thought. The Raptors acquiring Brandon Ingram. Oh, yeah, it's so many cooks in the kitchen. All their usage is going to be hurt. It's just not going to be good for any of the players involved in the Raptors, right? Obviously. Fast forward to this season, I'd argue, frankly, all the Raptors dynasty players, or the main players, all their stock has actually either stayed about the same or risen slightly. I don't think any of their players' stock has dramatically fallen. Partially, I think it's because it has a more free-flowing offense and it's just a lot of talent that it's worked out. But also, I think that Scotty Barnes has just gotten better on defense. Emmanuel Quickley is showing his offensive talents. Brandon Ingram's doing this thing. RJ Barrett is still seeing plenty of shot volume. And we talked about the Raptors about a month ago on this point. And yeah, I was surprised. They're actually fun and doing good. And I didn't expect that with the Brandon Ingram trade. And I don't think really anyone in the dynasty community was viewing the Brandon Ingram trade as a positive for the Raptors players. De'Aaron Fox to the Spurs. I think we still have to see, Stephon Castle and then eventually Dylan Harper all be healthy at the same time. But we've seen the flashes of Dylan Harper already. Even while Fox is playing, Harper still looks like a future star on-ball guard. Stephon Castle, yes, Fox was out at the beginning of the season, but Castle was still able to show enough improvements where, frankly, this non-believer is kind of believing in him. And I think that's really the Spurs players. That's Fox's Spurs trade really shows what I mean by overhyping these trade deals, where Fox is going to come to the Spurs and then that's the usage guy. No, I mean, if players are good, they're going to develop anyways. They're going to be able to show enough flashes where, yeah, it doesn't matter if they don't get like the clear cut best usage situation right away. If they're good enough, they're going to develop regardless and be able to show us what they can do. Even if the situation may not seem ideal at first, or you may not see that immediate opportunity or usage, you got to be able to project in those smaller moments. And that's kind of what Dynasty is all about, right? Projecting what players can do in the future based not necessarily on seeing it fully first, but being able to project their moments. And there's a lot of ways you can evaluate those moments, whether it's eye test, stats, mixture of both. But you want to project those smaller moments to the bigger moments. So when the opportunity does come, you already were ready for that. You already were rostering that player who finally got the opportunity. You don't have to wait for some massive trade to spur that. That a trade deadline or players getting traded shouldn't really be the reason you're massively shifting your values. It can help because then suddenly you get that production earlier. But I don't think it should massively change your evaluations. Let's even go back to the 2024 trade deadline. Daniel Gafford moved to the Mavericks. Oh, is this going to hurt Derek Lively, or is this going to hurt Derek or Daniel Gafford rather? I mean, frankly, no. They both played fine, both played well. And then Lively's had injuries since that has slowed his dynasty ascent. Gafford's been fine because he's still been able to get his minutes and do things outside the trade deadline, right? Not the trade itself. Emmanuel quickly to the Raptors in that OG Anunoby trade. Yes, I think this is the case where it was then, I mean, Emmanuel quickly stock dramatically rose from that trade, right? Because now he's going to be a starter. You see that minutes increase. But I mean, we kind of knew if Emmanuel quickly got more opportunity that his stock would rise. We didn't need the trade to kind of determine that fully. And I mean, yeah, Emmanuel quickly was a dynasty riser because of that trade. But I'd almost argue his long-term dynasty outlook was very similar in a way. In a way, right? You maybe not the minutes weren't as clear, but in terms of the talent and what he could provide, that was kind of clear, even in that 6-man role on the Knicks. And he's now doing that. In a way, I feel like I'm hurting my future content here because I'm going to put out a trade deadline primer sometime in January. And I'm going to say, here are situations that could change. But that's, and I'm not, that's important content too. It is important to think about what players could change in the short term. But that's more from an active trading standpoint, because I think it's more their perception of their value trades, but not their actual dynasty value. And this is just straight up reacting to trades. I think doing moves, anticipating trades and anticipating opportunities that can open up, that's where I'm a little suspicious of doing that activity, right? Like trying to trade Ryan Rollins now because, maybe the Bucks get a point guard or Bucks get a guard back or something in some hypothetical Giannis trade, and that's going to ding Ryan Rollins' value, and he's not going to get a chance to show anything. I mean, Ryan Rollins has proved, in my eyes, that he can be a starting guard and put up these stats. Yeah, I mean, maybe they get a Dylan Harper. Why can't they both do well? Ryan Rollins has shown that he has this ability. I don't think a trade is going to hurt him in the short term. I don't think it hurts him long term. Giannis going somewhere, Giannis is going to get his usage. Giannis is going to be amazing on a per game basis, no matter where he's at. Bobby Portis, yeah, we're seeing he's on the decline. He's not doing as well. Doesn't matter if Giannis is traded and this quote unquote opportunity opens up. I don't really think that matters for Dynasty too much. And so really what I'm stressing here with trade deadline season hype, should we all get don't lose your minds over trade deadline season hype. And really, what I would stress is to not try to be the smartest guy in the room. Don't be that manager who feels the need to make this trade anticipation and really get ahead of things. You don't need to go that far. I think trade for players you like, but at the correct value. Don't price in some future value due to a trade you think may or may not happen due to how you project this trade on FanSpo or SpoTrack or whatever, and then you see, oh, and if this happens and that happens, like Charlie Day, I think his name is, and It's Always Sunny with the Pepe Silver meme. Oh, if this happens, that happens, and this happens, and that. Take a step back. You don't have to be the smartest guy in the room there. Trade for players because you actually think they're good and they could develop. Not because of a trade, but because you're actually seeing those flashes and moments. I'm going to get hyped about trade deadline season. I am probably going to make plenty of moves in my dynasty leagues, maybe partially influenced by these trades rumors, but it's more because I want to trade for those players involved. Not the primary reason won't be because of any trade deadline season hype. Let's shift to now a player on the rise and a player who has been amazing to start this season, and Deni Avdija. So we're on YouTube, pulling up the stats here, going through it as we normally do. We talked about the Blazers in the offseason, how they're going to need an offensive option, right? With Scoot Henderson out, and Drew Holiday is a little older, mixed bag. Shaedon Sharpe, is he that guy? No. The player who has stepped up for the Blazers this season and has led their offense is Deni Avdija. And as of December 5th, when we're recording this, Deni Avdija's most improved player odds as a FanDuel is plus 290, leading the most improved player odds just ahead of Jalen Duren, who we talked about a few weeks ago. But Deni Avdija, he is leading the odds right now in most improved player. And it's really obvious to see. Just look at the jumps he's made. I mean, stat-wise, it's impressive, right? He is playing 4 minutes more per game this season, but still improving his points per game from 17 to nearly 26 a game. That's a huge jump. Improving his assists from 4 to 6 a game. Very nice jumps there. But I think what really stands out for me when I watch Deni Avdija, and when I look at the stats here, it's not that he's on. In a way, he hasn't made any skill improvements, right? Like his percentages are roughly the same. If you go to now, we're looking at the per 100 possession stats, and we'll get into that a little bit more in a second here. But it's not that these are like any of these are massively improved per se. But it's the fact that he's doing it at such a large volume that is impressive. And doing this at such a league-leading volume, what he's doing in terms of his drives and his scoring, and then still maintaining this level of efficiency, that's the impressive part with Avdija here. I mean, if you talk about it with a lot of players, but it's impressive to increase your usage and then not see your efficiency or other stats drop off too much, if at all. And that's the case with Deni Avdija, right? His field goal percentage still hovering around 47.5% with more shots. His three-point percentage hovering, it's actually a little higher this year, but it's basically around 37% this season. 2-point field goal percentage around 55%. Even though he's taking about 3.5, 3.5 shots more per 100 possessions, Deni Avdija is still just as efficient on these shots, which is just awesome. It's just awesome to see a player do that, right? Look at his usage. Usage up about 5 percentage points to 28% usage on Basketball Reference. It's a pretty high scoring usage, right? For a player who, yes, he is running more pick and roll, but he's not like your traditional point guard, not like your SGA bringing up the court every time. He's not your James Harden controlling and dominating the offense. He is just a relentless attacker of the basket. And frankly, one of the best players in the league this year at driving to the rim. And that's what I really want to focus on now statistically and analyze is Deni Avdija's drives to the basket. You can find, we looked at this a couple of times, you can find player drives per game stats on NBA.com. And look, it's really nice. I didn't have to filter by Deni Avdija's name here because I can just simply sort by most drives per game. And Deni Avdija is right at the top. That's right. Deni Avdija leads the league in drives per game at 19.5 drives per game. Huge total, right? You can see some of the other names here. Shay's at 18, Cade's at 18, Josh Giddey at 17.5. But there's Deni Avdija right at the top, 19.5 drives per game, leading the league. What I find fascinating here is that he's actually not shooting a lot comparatively, right? Field goal attempts on these drives per game, he's taking about 5.5 per game on his drives. Hitting them at an all right rate, 51%. It's about average. It's not anything too special. So why is Deni Avdija scoring so much better this season? If drives per game, or his drive game rather, is the way he's scoring a lot, wouldn't you expect that field goal attempts to be higher in that percentage? What Avdija has done this season is really upped his free throw rate. We'll go back to Basketball Reference for a second here. Look at his free throw attempts per 100 possessions. 8.4 per 100 possessions last season is already a pretty impressive number. Skyrocketed to 13.2 free throw attempts per 100 possessions. That's a super high total there. And being able to get to the line that much is going to provide you such a safe scoring floor on a nightly basis. And it's also so aesthetically pleasing to watch Deni Avdija get these fouls because he's not doing a lot of grifting, not doing a lot of head jerking back stuff. He is just driving with such force and physicality that defenders have to foul him. And it looks like he's actually trying to score. It's just so nice to watch Deni Avdija drive and just constantly go to the basket, and not hunt fouls. He is earning every one of these fouls. I had to mention that. I love seeing how Deni Avdija drives. It's a great change of pace. But yeah, so I mean, his free throw attempts per game free throw attempts per game on drives rather is towards the top of the league, right? So even if the field goal attempts aren't, he's getting to the line a lot. And then what I especially love about his drive game is, of course, teams are keying in on it, right? They're like, Deni Avdija, we know you're going to drive at us. We got to collapse on this because you're so dang good at it. What Deni Avdija is doing is then passing so well out of these drives. Now we're going to start this column here by pass attempts out of these drives. Deni Avdija leads the league in passes out of drive at 10 a game. And it's why he's getting so many extra assists this season. Going back to per 100 possessions, Deni Avdija last season, 6.3 assists per 100 possessions. This season, up to 8.5 assists per 100 possessions. You can see that in the per game stats, right? Where's assist? We mentioned it earlier. They're up over 6 a game. Now you're talking about some serious statistical production there in assist. And it's because of his drive game. His drive game is that threatening, and that it demands the respect from the defense that it's allowing all of Deni Avdija's game to open up. And I think that's really why his assists are up. I think, yes, he is increased his passing vision, but it's because he's able to get to the rim and drive so often and be such a force there that he's able to make these passes, and it's opening up these avenues for him that weren't there previously at such a high volume too. Now, what I really love too is that Deni Avdija isn't perfect at this yet. If you look at this turnover rate, then on his drives per game, his turnover rate is 7.2%. And if you notice here on the screen, a lot of other players are well below that. Obviously, Shai is going to be one of the best here, 2.8% turnover rate on his drives per game. But a lot of other high volume players are around, 6, some are lower. But really, they pop out at like 6 or 5 or 4. So this is where Deni Avdija could actually improve. And this is where he can be even better, is limiting these turnovers on his drives. And I think as he just gets more reps, we'll see him then limit these turnovers, get even more either field goals or free throws or assists out of these drives, and then get even more fantasy production. And now I want to look at his turnovers per game, right? The rate is increased, right? Up to almost 5 turnovers per 100 possessions. That's about 3.5 turnovers per game. That is a little higher than you want. And normally I would see that as a bit of a flag saying that this player needs to, this isn't a player you maybe want to have this level of usage because of that turnover rate. But what's interesting here, I know I've been scrolling a lot on the screen here, bear with me. Look at these advanced stats, right? His turnover rate has actually decreased because he has the ball so much more and he's doing so much more that even though his raw turnovers are up, he's turning over the ball at a lower rate. So in a way, it's not as much of a flag or a red flag as I would say for a player increasing their usage. I see this as actually a point where he's already showing improvement and can even further refine his game more. And that's awesome. Yeah, basically, I'm saying Deni Avdija could be doing even better. And frankly, I think he should have plenty of chance to show that as the season progresses. So I'll end here, at least on Deni Avdija, on a question. Why can't Deni Avdija just be Franz Wagner, or what we think Franz Wagner is? And I'll do one more than that. Why shouldn't Deni Avdija be in Dynasty rankings where Franz Wagner is? I don't think I'm going to have Deni Avdija that high just yet, just because let me see a little bit more proof to put in here. But it was definitely in the back of my head as I'm updating my Dynasty rankings. And when I just kind of asked myself that question, I kind of had to be like, yeah, Deni Avdija, I think it's very legit. I think it should continue. And I think we should definitely view him as, is he an all-star this season? I haven't looked that closely at all-star, but he's definitely doing amazing, doing great for fantasy, putting up stats across the board. And I think we should honestly view Deni Avdija as a very, not even a quick rising star, as a fantasy star today. And that's a pretty big improvement here from Deni Avdija. We're going to shift now from Deni Avdija to a player who's been a fantasy darling in the past, but are those days over? In Jaren Jackson Jr. And normally, I don't like talking about players who have established fantasy value as fallers so early in the season, right? It's only been, about 20 games for Jaren Jackson Jr. to date. And normally I would say this is a small sample size. Situation in Memphis is questionable right now. Maybe Jaren Jackson Jr. came back from injury a little early. Maybe that's affecting his play. I don't think it's too early to at least talk about Jaren Jackson Jr. here, though, as a faller in Dynasty. Because there are a lot of reasons for concerns here. And when you have so many reasons for concerns, they're not huge concerns, but when you have so many reasons, the flip side is that there's a lot of things that Jaren Jackson Jr. needs to recover from him for him to be the player that he once was. And that's worrisome. And so, yeah, I don't think it's too early to talk about Jaren Jackson Jr. Even though he's only 26. He's not even 27 yet. Should theoretically be in his prime, and yet he obviously isn't. If you roster him, you know that he's been very disappointing to date so far. He's playing about the same minutes per game as last season, about 30 minutes per game. But his stats are just straight up down across the board. Pretty much every stat is down. I mean, we can simply look at the per 100 possession stats too. I mean, field goal attempts per game, down. Efficiency, down in both the 2-point category and the 3-point category. Yeah, free throw attempts, down. Free throw percentage up slightly. I mean, okay, that's probably the least consequential stat here, right? It's rebounds down. Assists down by 0.1. I mean, yeah, that's not a huge note, but it's at the same or down. Blocks way down, way down. Everything's down, down, down. So why is this the case for Jaren Jackson Jr.? What things do we need to look at for him to improve? Obviously, the first thing, the shot volume is down about 3 shots per 100 possessions. And unless your efficiency is just improved that much, your shots go down, your points go down. This kind of usually basic math right there. Usage down from 28%, even 30% the last couple seasons to 25% this season, which honestly isn't 25% for his player type is actually pretty solid. But still, I mean, that's down a decent amount. So why is Jaren Jackson taking less shots? Why is Jaren Jackson Jr. not as involved in the offense? Let's go to our handy NBA.com page with his drives per game. Now, what I'm showing here is the 24-25 season. So this is the last season. Jaren Jackson Jr. had about 11 drives per game. And I've highlighted in the past too, I think on a pod last year, that Jaren Jackson Jr. drive game was a huge component of his rise. 11 drives per game. I mean, we saw Deni Avdija have 19 and a half drives per game this season leading the league. 11 drives per game last season from Jaren Jackson Jr. is a good volume. Took a lot of shots on these drives, hitting them at a 51% rate. Took about 7.2 field goal attempts on drives last season. I mean, all this looks pretty positive, right? And I think this is what drove his scoring increase that we saw the past two seasons. So you want to guess what drove down his scoring this season? Yeah, it's his drives per game. You guessed it. Ding, ding, ding. Let's look at his drives per game this season. Similar minutes, keep in mind. He's down from 11 drives per game last season to 7 drives per game this season. Field goal attempts down from, 7 on these drives per game, down to 5 on these drives per game. Yes, he's hitting them slightly better. I'd rather have the volume, frankly, on drives per game. That pretty much speaks right there, that it's about 2.5 less field goal attempts per game on drives. That simply right there explains his field goal difference and his usage drop. It's the drives per game is down and the drive volume's down. Sure, I mean, you could say that this is a product of maybe it's a lingering injury, maybe he's adjusting to the new offensive system. And I actually do think the new offensive system emphasizing pick and roll doesn't play to Jaren Jackson Jr.'s strengths. But still, I think we're seeing him not take opportunities where there are, and he's not being as aggressive. The 3-point attempts have pretty much stayed the same, about 8 threes per 100 possessions. And the percentage is a little lower, but that's fine. It's within that band of, that's what we should expect, right? But is that offensive ability and I guess the ability to up that usage, right? Because a lot of ways that you get your usage up into those high 20s is by doing more self-created stuff or drive game or improving that. If those drives aren't going to come back for Jaren Jackson Jr., his points aren't going to come back. And whether it's the injury or whether it's the new offensive system or whether it's just him getting worse, maybe, definitely the first point of concern with Jaren Jackson Jr. The second big thing is on defense, where it's been a story the past season that his blocks per game are down. Now, I don't think we thought it would ever reach that 5.0 high water mark back in the 22-23 season. That's, to be clear, 5.0 blocks per 100 possessions. 5.0 blocks per game would be absurd and ludicrous. But it's down to 1.6 now per 100 possessions. 1.6 is not that much. Just a 3% block rate is very, very middling. And I don't know if that's a product of a lack of Zach Edey next to him. He can't roam as much. Frankly, I just think he's just worse on his contest now, honestly. I think he's just a worse rim protector than he was. I think this is just honestly a talent drop-off from Jaren Jackson Jr. You can somewhat see in the fouls per game, fouls per 100 possessions, where it's now skyrocketed to almost 7 fouls per 100 possessions. I think that indicates that he's not always in the best position. When you watch Grizzlies film, when I've watched Grizzlies film, I honestly just don't notice him as much on the defensive end. And he's just doesn't seem like he's as much of a deterrent, much as a force blocking the ball. And so something I talk about a lot with players and when I analyze them for Dynasty and Fantasy is what are the players actually doing for us? And we talked about that last week, right? What are players actually doing for us? What is Jaren Jackson strong in right now? There's honestly no stat here that Jaren Jackson Jr., I would argue, is strong in. And obviously, if you look at fantasy rankings just from websites or Z-score ranking, it's gonna show that, right? But that's Jaren Jackson Jr. is not doing anything too great for us right now, and he's like consistently top 50 in dynasty rankings. If this holds, this is not a player that should be top 50 in dynasty rankings. Now, again, he should be better, right? Should be better. He's 26, should be better. I think you could point to the injury as why he's not doing as good in the drive game and this rim contesting department. And I think there is some buy low that exists here, but I'm not fully sure. I think I have more question marks than I do answers that I feel comfortable about. I there are definitely some players that I will hand wave injuries away from. The Mellow Ball I'm a fan of, even though it's been a lot of injuries for him. But at least LaMelo Ball produces when he plays. Jaren Jackson Jr. is. It could be injuries, but it could be a skill decline, and I'm not sure I want to be in the wrong end of that. I think the name value of Jaren Jackson Jr. could do a lot of work for trades right now. You could really sell this idea of the injury and just it's an early season performance. But I think you could get back a good amount in a trade for Jaren Jackson Jr. right now in Dynasty, and that a year from now or even next offseason, you feel pretty smart about. So that made me do a little shopping if you roster Jaren Jackson Jr., just see what's out there and really think about what stats is he giving me? Is that impactful, or should I maybe look to maybe just trade him away and let someone else deal with the lingering questions here for Jaren Jackson Jr.? Let's end now on a more positive note, looking at the Eastern Conference leading Detroit Pistons as the team that I wanted to focus on for this upcoming week. Most of the team is pretty much back and healthy, so I think there's no better time to really start looking at them. Yes, we do have a short week with the NBA Cup, but I think there's still obviously lots of things you can get out of by watching them. I criticize the Pistons for not maybe making an all-in move and basically saying, Cade Cunningham, you're going to be our dude. You're going to get all the usage. And yeah, his efficiency's down a little bit from last season, but really it's just in the three-point jumper not falling. Otherwise, I think he's pretty much stayed the same. And that's a good thing, right? He was great last season. He's been great this season. So him staying the same and acting as this huge on-ball offensive hub for the team has been fine. And he's been a part of, obviously, an extremely successful team. We're still seeing him provide defensive stats, too, with 1.5 steals and 0.8 blocks a game, giving him a little bit more juice in that department than some huge offensive monsters that we see. The three-point percentage, 29%. It's going to be better. I don't know if he'll be great at threes, but he's going to be probably at least average. The free throws are there. Obviously, the boards, the assists are there. Cade Cunningham is a monster and is powering so much on this team. Still think they should acquire a running mate. We'll get to that in a little bit, but obviously Cade Cunningham is the hub on this team. We talked about Jaren Duren a few weeks ago, so I'm not going to get into huge depth on him here. But obviously, the shot volume increasing has been awesome. The rim protection is better. Even if it doesn't show up on blocks, it is better, which gives him a lot more safety, I'd say, on his floor. I think he's obviously a long-term starter clearly at this point, and probably at least a focal point for any team in the future. So you're getting great shot volume. You're getting, obviously, amazing boards, a little bit of defensive stats, just getting a lot of good stuff from Jalen Duren. And then after I think those two clear-cut names, we have a lot of dudes on this team that, frankly, are good enough to see playing time in a rotation. I mean, frankly, you can just see off this page, right? If we were to actually, we can just filter by games played. The Pistons have, 12 players that have played at least 12 games this season. That's honestly a large amount for a team that isn't in a lot of blowout situations. And that's without Jaden Ivey in that figure. So if you want to count in Jaden Ivey, that's 13 players who, frankly, are, I would say, worthy of some level of rotation time. We'll finish up the center room first here. I think it's a little easier than going to the slew of wings and guards. Isaiah Stewart, one of the best rim protectors in the league. I don't know how he does it at his like 6'8" stature, but he just is. Blocks per game, actually one of the most impactful ones in the league in terms of fantasy. Nearly 2 blocks per game for Isaiah Stewart. He's kind of getting away a little bit from that 3-point line. He's working a little bit more inside, which I think is good. I think he should be more of one of those opportunistic shooters than one of those spacing centers. So that's been good. So Isaiah Stewart, I think, is frankly, I think a low-end starter in the NBA, but at least on this team, a quality backup. We see plenty of times that Stewart and Duren play together. Definitely something I'm going to be looking to this upcoming week, just how much they play together and overlap. Then your Paul Reed is kind of your break. Where's Paul Reed down here? There we go. Kind of your break glass in case of emergency. But he's still doing some stuff. Maybe we'll see some minutes from him this week. Probably not with both Isaiah Stewart and Jalen Duren healthy. But yeah, Paul Reed does his job on this roster. I kind of more summarize, I think, those players there, and Cade Cunningham and Jalen Duren in the centers. I think those players I have a pretty good read on. It's the wings where I don't want to say confused by, but what's going on with all these dudes? This is where all the dudes are on the Pistons. I mean, first two, actually the second and third players by minutes played on the Pistons are Duncan Robinson and Tobias Harris. We're just kind of we know what they are vets. Duncan Robinson provides the shooting. Tobias Harris just provides some element of scoring and isolation scoring. And those dudes, we know who they are. It's the names past there that I am very intrigued by. Oscar Thompson, I would say a lot of Dynasty managers and people in the Dynasty community pegged him for take a level up or a leap up after his impressive defensive performance in the playoffs last season. I saw that, and I said, yes, the defense is great, and that's why he's going to get minutes. What's his role on the offensive end? And I think it's still very much a question, very much a doubt for Oscar Thompson. And it's why people like to say, oh, he's Amen Thompson on a per minute basis. That's great. Sure. I don't fully agree with that anyways, but even if that were the case, Oscar Thompson has to be good enough on offense to get high-level starter minutes. There's a reason why Oscar Thompson's at 28 minutes per game and Amen Thompson's at like 35 minutes a game. Because Amen Thompson is like a little bit better on offense, and that makes all the difference when you're towing this line on offense. So I'm interested to see, is Oscar Thompson he's actually just kind of very much there on offense, or is he adding enough on ball or doing enough other elements where we do see a high minutes long-term starter here? You can ask similar questions, I think, of Ron Holland, who is taking more threes this season, but it's very muted, right? I mean, 26% from deep. Come on, that's not getting it done. He is taking more threes. He is at least, glad to see we're seeing those steals up for Ron Holland at 1.7 a game. Because I was a huge fan of Ron Holland pre-draft in the 24 draft cycle. But kind of like Oscar Thompson, mini Oscar Thompson, is Holland going to be a black hole on offense? Can he actually do anything? Or is he someone that, his minutes are just going to be limited long-term because of those offensive question marks? A little lower, Javonte Green, your classic energy hustle guy. Karis LeVert, kind of a pseudo playmaker, right? You're a combo guard, rotation player, provide some defense. Then you got Jaden Ivey, who is trying to get reintegrated on the team. We mentioned with Cade Cunningham that he needs a running mate. He needs someone who can absorb high usage. There's a reason why Jaden Ivey didn't get an extension. One, coming back from injury, lots of question marks there, right? But two, Jaden Ivey probably is he good enough to be that running mate? This will be about his, third week from recovered from injury, hitting the court again. Is he actually showing anything? Is he too muted of a player to have faith in long term? Is he just kind of destined for a spark plug bench option on break glass in case of emergency guard? That's what I'm maybe looking for from Jaden Ivey specifically. Or is Jaren Jenkins the guy in Detroit who's really come on strong? I don't know if the shooting's there, but what I'm looking for from him is, hey, if you can't shoot, can you get into the lane enough, force actions from the defense, and then capitalize on that with either your physicality driving to the rim or your kick out passing game? And is Jaren Jenkins more of a curiosity, or is he someone that we should definitely care about for Dynasty? Hopefully, I can answer that question on next week's pod. And then lastly, the rest of the names are kind of depth names here. Wendell Moore doesn't figure too much. Talked about Paul Reed already. Let's talk about Chaz Lanier, who, basically he is just a three-point bomber. But I want to see if he can be anything more than that, or is his offensive task and role in the team basically, we need some shooting, get in there, shoot some threes. Yep, thank you, job done. And that's all he is. I don't think it's bad, but obviously, if that's all you're doing for Dynasty and Fantasy, you're not going to be too interested in him, right? But I think the Pistons obviously are a super fun team right now. Great on defense, but I know they're great on defense. I just want to see how these pieces are working offensively. And that's what I'm going to be looking forward to, and that's what I'm going to report on next week here on the Punt Intended podcast. That's where we'll end it here. So, yeah, Pistons, get ready for some juicy insights next week on them. We'll see if trade season heats up anymore. Players can start being traded in most cases December 15th. Again, I'm not thinking anything's going to happen. Harkening back to the beginning, not making any crazy moves, but maybe we'll get some rumors here or there. Maybe we'll have some more stuff to talk about there on the next week's episode. But until then, watch the Pistons, enjoy the NBA Cup. We'll see you next time on the Punt Intended podcast presented by FanDuel.